The Green Party is every single one of its members, every single local campaign, every single EDA, every single part of this party is what makes it what it is. And I accept that my role with the title leader is somewhat imaginary. I'm here as your spokesperson, I'm here as your vehicle, and I'm hoping I'm going to help make the world and Canada a better place through the vision that we collectively build of what the Green Party can be. I think it was Richard Thiessen mentioned the column that he'd seen in newspapers in the last election, do people need the Green Party? I've even questioned that since the last election, and I want you to know that the answer, after contemplation and thinking it over, and primarily because every single day, at least a handful and sometimes a dozen people I've never met before come up to me in a public place, a train station or the city street or a local store, and they say, "Oh, thank you so much for what you did in the last election." It made such a difference to have a voice that was speaking from their hearts, to have Green Party candidates across the country, but to have a leader who was just talking about issues and trying to focus on reality and trying to get people to understand that something very precious is at stake here. I said in my opening speech when the writ dropped back September 7th that Canadians needed to wake up and see that this was democracy and that democracy itself was at risk in the cynical manipulations of the political moves of other parties. But it's more than even democracy that's at risk. This is the first time in any time in all of the time that we could imagine as humanity's life story, we now stand at the first moment when the future itself is in doubt. Other times and other leaders and other politicians could talk confidently of what future generations would think of what we have done here today. But we as Greens know that we cannot confidently speak of future generations at all because our current undertakings on this planet as humanity put their existence in doubt. And that means that our obligation at this moment is one that exceeds that in terms of our moral responsibility of any other generation. And when we recognize that the future itself is in doubt, it's easy sometimes to imagine that the changes we need to make are impossible. And that's where the green voices from the past come to me. I was lucky enough to know and work with Petra Kelly. And Petra Kelly, the founder of the German Greens, once wrote that if we don't achieve the impossible, we will be forced to experience the unthinkable. That's the nature of our challenge. It may seem impossible that we should, from wherever we are, in organizing in our communities, in organizing at the grassroots, in reaching out to our fellow Canadians, in being a voice that says to Canadians, you are not mere spectators to this parade called politics. Politics is not a spectator sport. You are the participants. You are in charge. By your vote, you can change the world. And we present that vision that says, yes, a future is possible in which we have stopped using the resources of this planet in a way that compromises its future. We can see it on the horizon. We know it's possible that we can, just through addressing the waste in our society, through consuming less energy and using it more productively and more efficiently, we can avoid the worst outcomes of the climate crisis. We know that's possible. And that we know that the ancillary benefits of making those changes mean that future generations will live together in communities that are not choked with unbreathable air. We'll know that future generations do not live on a planet which is divided between those who live in gross abundance and obscene levels of consumption and those who struggle with barely nothing, less than $1 a day, without clean drinking water. We know that it's possible to change the entire planet and the way it's organized so that its central operating principle is that life matters, that forests matter, that the living waters matter, and that every single child that draws breath of life has a right to decency, housing, medical care, and a life that is worth living in terms of its richer meaning. We know that that future is there and that it's possible. Another Green, Ingrid Betancourt, closed the Global Greens Gathering, the first one ever held in Australia, years before, well, actually only months before she was imprisoned. You do know Ingrid Betancourt, who was held by FARC for years in the jungles of Colombia. But she, before her taken into captivity, speaking in Australia, said very simply, the future is green. It will be, and it must be. And that's what we share and we hold in our hearts. It's not just that we don't like current policies or that we criticize what other governments are doing or other political parties are doing. What we most need to share with the people for whom we ask them to vote for us, to talk about our ideas, to push for change, what we most share with all those people is the profound shared vision of the world as it should be, as it must be. A world where our future is green, where there is fairness and equity, where there is compassion and cooperation, where we practice true nonviolence, not just the absence of war, but where we devote ourselves to the central operating principle that life matters. This is our existence. This is our challenge. Thank you so much for being green. The future is green.